Never mind, we are back. I thought there was going to be a short break, but no, Rauf and Magnus are off. Alex will start taking you through it while I try and get the player cameras.
So, in this first position here, we've got Mamedov with the black piece and Magnus with the white pieces. He's an extra pawn here, pawn to the good. In these kind of structures though, but the biggest difference is he's down in exchange. So actually Magnus is maybe able to hold. The position might be just about tenable, but black is the one pressing here. For sure, he goes knight f6. That's a very aggressive move. He grabs the pawn on h7, but black is probably going to have some counterplay against those queenside pawns. Knight on e5 hits the pawn on d3, and the question is, what are you going to do about that pawn? King does drop back to e7, so it seems to be. Well, now the board has been updated. Sorry guys, I cannot actually see the board at times when the Zoom call is being adjusted. That's hence the reason for, bishop f1 offering the exchange here, but the pawn on h6 is huge here. Black is going to be tied down to the defense of that pawn. On the other hand, white's king cannot break in, so what we're going to see is a potential draw here with the repetition, or Magnus is going to press for the clock situation. Objectively it's equal, but Magnus is the one pressing. He's got 6 seconds against just under 1, so I think that's going to be it. We're not going to see any kind of trades, and we see Magnus with that squeeze on the clock. Nothing to be done. Sorry guys about the somewhat messy start to this particular game. We will we will improve the situation as the stream goes. It's been a chaotic start. Here we see Magnus playing the same variation of the Caro-Kann that Grandmaster Rasmus essayed against him in his first match. And this is a very typical situation in this exciting variation. We've got opposite side castle, bishop c7, seeking to keep the knight, but also queen on d5 will attack, bishop e4, preventing that. Whoa, tactics, bishop takes, king takes, queen e6, picking up this bishop. But d5 means that at the end the pawn on c6 drops. Black goes after this pawn. He'll probably take it. He cannot because knight e7 check will be huge. That's why he goes bishop takes h2. Still, Magnus cannot take this. He can, however, collect Magnus's exchange here. The question is this pawn worth more than an exchange? Bishop b6 is an option. However, the problem was in the first move you couldn't go back. You could have stopped that with bishop c7, hence f4. And the question is, will this bishop survive? We might see rook h1. The pawn on f4 is defended, but this bishop is hit. And in fact, excellent way of navigating the complications by Magnus. And Magnus is now actually up. He's up in exchange, but that knight on d4 was very strong. It was hitting these pawns, so we're now going into a rook and pawn endgame, and white resigns because it was a very favorable one. All the pawns were falling.
Magnus off to a 2-0 start against Rauf, who will have to bounce back very, very soon.
That's huge. You have to feel a little bit for Rauf, who had great positions, but somehow the world champion, he showed his class in both of them. Here we're seeing a very nice position, and this is trouble because if you take on c3, we see this attack, and after e5 the black knight goes back, but white has gained some extra tempo. Knight f4, hitting the rook and hitting the pawn. Rauf Mamedov is in a lot of trouble. e6, he's not even interested. He gives up this pawn, but the idea is he wants to break up the structure and get at the black king here. g6 falls, and you're going to see more pressure on e6. Black and white continues to not care about this pawn. Knight takes e6. The king on c8 has had to just run away from the king's side. We see bishop e3. Probably looking for rook c1. Black trying to find some chances to survive with his king, but black just resigns. That seems a little bit...
I'm surprised that Rauf is not fighting on a bit more.
Yeah, it seemed a little bit premature, but I think that the reason was because if you went king b7, there was a tactic with rook takes f6. It was really a crushing tactic, but I think the players are seeing it so quickly that it's very hard to react in time.
So Magnus 3-0. 3-0 to Magnus. We've seen him so far. We haven't seen anything of what he did against Rasmus, of playing the wrong cloud or whatever he was up to. He means business.
Queen is dropped. Queen has dropped on e6. Magnus had pre-moved f6, and Rauf with a very important win there.
Yeah, very important to get into the match. His first point. So now just trailing by 2, and I mean at this bullet, anything can happen. I think in bullet, if you get into a run, you can absolutely score a few wins in a row.
Yeah, and here we're seeing King's Indian defense. Magnus is going for it here. Very nice position, I think. Black is sort of shut down in the King's Indian. You often want to break with f5. Now that square belongs to white, and d takes c6. There are problems here with the backward pawn on d6. White is castling into these advanced pawns. He doesn't really care. Now when you take everything, bishop f3, I don't see a solution against this, because if you go f5, you're just going to take. Has Rauf Mamedov dropped a piece? As far as I can tell, he has, and he's going into the tank, which tells you a bad story. He continues. He decides to sacrifice his knight for a couple of pawns on f2 and c4. There are some chances, but the white pieces are too strong here. And after bishop here, I don't even see a way to escape with the queen, and we're going to see a resignation. So Magnus picking up a win in 22 moves, 4-1. So far, very, very dominant performance.
Very impressive stuff. I have just sent one of my dear mods the brackets so that you people, I'm sorry, I'm not sure, I don't think they were published, but someone will put them in the chat very, very soon. So remember, Magnus and Rauf are the only ones playing for now. After that, we will see the next quarterfinal and the next and the next, and they will be in the chat very soon.
And this is looking like it's going to go from bad to worse here for Mamedov. He's down in exchange, and I don't see quite enough compensation for it. He has one pawn. That's usually not enough. h6, however, you can potentially, you can maybe take here, rook takes and knight e6. I think maybe that's what Mamedov is calculating. He sees something that we haven't. I'm sure that Magnus had also seen something if neither player captures there. Rook f5, chasing after the pawn, and knight f4. Now that's a huge square here for the knight. The knight on e4 is hanging, so you have to take care of that. Pawn on c4 is now defended, the knight on f3 beefed up, but we're probably going to see rook d5, and these pawns are very difficult to defend. The first pawn drops, white goes rook a3 in order to defend this pawn. And we may see e4 instead. Magnus offering the exchange here, but he is confident in this resulting endgame. You win a pawn here, white knight does get to invade to e5, but I don't think that's much. Now the knight and the pawn falls, and with 4 pawns,
he resigns.
Mamedov sees no options there. 5-1 to Carlsen.
5-1, a big score. Magnus just 1.5 points away from getting through to the semi-finals already. He will also, after this, he will get a 1.5 hour break, seeing as the semi-finals will only start at 7:30 Central European time. Okay, so what do we have here?
We've got an interesting position. The king is on f1. Yeah. It's a little bit unusual. But on the other hand, it's not such a big deal when you have a nice advantage in the center like Magnus does. I like Magnus's position. He's castling, as we say, by hand here. We've got the pawn on b3. A little bit weak, and black does get the a file, but white can challenge that, and he can also push the pawns, which is going to be useful for him activating this bishop. That's what we see now. The b file has opened up, and white wants to invade onto b1. Black trying to fix this bishop, which wasn't doing much, pointing against d4. White retreats, does not want to accept this bishop, and we might see eventually the knight coming to b4. c5 as the pawn was under fire, and I really like white's position. You don't want to play d5, but big tactic miss there by Magnus. The pawn on e3, he goes knight e2, offering this exchange. You can take 2 minor pieces, but in the end, king f1 is going to give you, or king f3 is going to give you some problems. However, Mamedov saw further. He saw that he could use this this square, but d7 is going to cost him a piece. So the question is, who saw further after all? Here we see that pawn promoting, and that's a piece, and we see an exchange. So I really think that short of a serious mistake here, king takes f4, not possible by the way. Knight e6 check, nice little trick from the very tricky Mamedov, but he's got 8 seconds against Carlsen 16, and a lovely trick. The point is, no matter which way you took, you're able to win something. It's a clean exchange now, and I think that Magnus, if he doesn't win on position, he's just going to convert on time. Will he risk taking here? He goes for the more practical approach. He's threatening this pawn, nothing wrong with taking it, and now you could even capture here. That's what Magnus does. He knows that this king and pawn game is
very practical decision.
Incredible play.
And Magnus now with the black pieces up 6-1, a very impressive display. He needs only a draw to advance. It's not been, I think it's been tough. It's so hard to say, that Rauf hasn't had a good day, because Magnus, when he turns on the turbo, he's just so incredible. I guess he is the favorite in this tournament, but he will be very eager to get revenge. There was the titled arena in bullet format on Lichess on Saturday, where Alireza crushed the field, and Magnus only finished, I believe, in 6th place or something like this.
Yeah, and in terms of this game, by the way, in my opinion, short of a miracle, this is going to be the final game, because Magnus has moves back Mamedov where he wants him. He's got the bishop pair, he's got a very healthy pawn structure, the queens are off the board, so there aren't many attacking options. So overall, I think black's position is just great. At some point, maybe bishop d2 you have to watch out for. Be careful, don't exchange the rooks and take this pawn though, because rook d8 will be checkmate, so that's why bishop g6 creating a square. But the bishop pair is very strong. On the other hand, white at least has this a pawn. I believe that it can be controlled, but in bullet you never know. Some knight b6 ideas in the future. You didn't want to do that earlier because bishop e3, rook d7 is very strong, and actually I think I'm going to have to swallow my words. Eat my words, exactly, because here the position is looking very, very nice for Mamedov, who turns the screws there, and just an excellent victory from a position that didn't look to promise so much.
Absolutely. So we saw some frustration there from Carlsen, but he still has four match points, shall we say. He just needs a draw, needs 6-2.
Yeah, and in this, I mean, yeah, I don't think he's too stressed in this situation. But still, very nice fighting spirit from Rauf. It would be very tempting to sort of give up, throw in the towel there. We're seeing rook c1 here. Once again, Magnus seems to have got in a very comfortable position. He's got a bit of a center here. Black's main hope is probably associated with pressing this center, as well as, you know, the base of the pawns here.
But now he
doesn't have this option because of rook c2.
So he forces the queen exchange.
Well, queen d5 allows to stay in, but it comes at a very heavy price, this pawn on e7. And we might see, Magnus he means business. He just grabs another pawn. Now queen e2 defending that base of the pawns. Black trying to go for some play, but a3 shutting that down.
Very solid play for Magnus.
Yeah, rook c3, a really nice move, defending the base of the pawns. That's very typical. Queen c2, attacking more pawns, and I wouldn't be surprised if he just grabs it. That is what he does, and he goes back offering a queen exchange. That's declined, and now he starts to press with the pawns. I think we really are going to see this as the final game, but bishop takes e3, missed. King f1 and queen b1 check. There are some fighting chances here all of a sudden for the very, very tricky, but this rook has dropped, and that is that.
King is gonna run.
Yeah, unless you can skewer the queen in some way. For example, even king c4, there was a rook block. Now you're up a rook and the king is gonna hide. I wouldn't be surprised by resignation.
And we see a resignation here. Magnus is true, 7-2. We see Rauf is not happy. I think Rauf is an excellent bullet player, of course, but against Magnus it is tough. Magnus put on the squeeze, the turbo, and we're gonna turn the player cameras off. Okay, we will take one quick breather now. The next quarterfinal will be Penguin, Andrew Tang. So I'm sure people are looking forward to seeing Andrew in action, and he will be taking on Alexei Sarana from Russia, aka maybe next time, which will be a huge match.